LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the first edition of my LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which what should be a really educational, informative, political commentary and media criticism program for you today. But since this is the first edition of what's kind of a new show, since I've done the Sunday show for 8 years and now moved it to Monday, and so I figured I'd take a minute to explain my credentials for why I think I'm qualified to do this show every week, and also some changes I've made moving to Monday. But first, in terms of credentials, I don't always say it every week, but let's see, I have a bachelor's degree in history from Yale University from many years ago, and then I got a law degree from Washington University in St. Louis, and pretty much since when I graduated law school to about 5 years after that, I worked as a public defender, first in Missouri and then in California. Also, since around the time I graduated law school till now, I've worked as a volunteer activist with the ACLU and been involved in a lot of issues. And of course, all opinions I express here are my own opinions. But maybe most importantly, since the 1980s sometime, I've been watching these Sunday morning news analysis shows just for my own information and edification, I guess, and I've rarely missed a Sunday, and you saw I commented on them for 8 years worth of Sundays, and now moving the show to Mondays, I've tried to think how I might change things a little bit and just give people a little more information in the video description. I used to have a clip list that I'd put down there, but now if you click down there, I have the media mentioned in my Monday media mix-up, where I've actually described in actual English sentences sort of each of the clips or images that I'm going to use in the show. And since I think I'm going to have a lot more recorded show viewers and not as many live show viewers, for the recorded show viewers, I'm going to put little time indexes for each of the clip descriptions for when that clip is discussed, so you can click on the time indexes and get to the part of the show that most interests you, or go back and re-watch the parts of the show that most interest you, I guess, or whatever. Anyway, so that is sort of the premise of the show, and I'm considering some other changes, but anyway, I don't want to bore you so much with the introduction, and I want to get to sort of, the whole topic is kind of political comedy this week. It's Diaper Donald destroying democracy, and the premise is based on this speech Trump gave on Saturday night at the North Carolina Republican Convention, and I put a link in the video description to a Snopes article debunking this idea that Trump had his pants on backwards. Here, I think I actually took an image of that. That's the first thing on my media mentioned list. And if you go down to in the video description, I also have the sources of all my clips and images, including this Snopes article. If you go to that article, you'll see a whole bunch of like close-up shots where you can't see Trump's zipper or whatever. There's this weird bulge and these weird wrinkles. And now, as a man who's worn men's pants, I don't know that you can really put them on backwards. I mean, you need someone else to like put them on if you were putting them on backwards almost. So that doesn't seem reasonable. Maybe they're like pants with no zippers, like an elastic waistband, or I mean, who knows? But there is this weird bulge in there that looks, I mean, more like a diaper than wearing the pants backwards. So that's where I came up with my Diaper Donald destroying democracy. But that's just to make fun of Donald Trump the way he makes fun of so many people, I guess. Not to, I don't know, is it fat shaming someone? There's this whole thing, I think it's called FUBA, F-U-B-A. I don't even want to go into that, but you can Google that. And the real thing that we have to fear from Donald Trump is not whether or not he's wearing a diaper, but the things he said, and especially if you look in my clip description, you'll see the first clip I'm showing, or number 2 after the Snopes image, is Donald Trump connects his lies about 2020 election, crime of the century, to Republicans changing voting laws in many states to protect so-called election integrity. And, you know, that's why this is important. Not that we should be paying attention to crazy stuff Donald Trump says, but because a lot of Republicans believe it, and especially a lot of Republicans are using it to change laws to make it not only harder for people to vote, but as I will argue with all the clips I'm going to show you, to make it harder for the popular vote to make it to the Electoral College, because they're giving power to like the state legislatures to reject the popular vote and install their own electors instead, which isn't focused on a lot, but I'll show you a couple clips that point out what I'm saying, especially Angus King, Senator Angus King, in the last of the clips, says it explicitly. But before I get to any of that, you have to see what I'm talking about in terms of Donald Trump connecting the election lies to the voter suppression laws that are passing in many states. And so this was actually like an hour and 40-minute speech. I watched the whole thing, so you don't have to, I guess, but if you want to, the source of all my clips is down in the video description. But I decided to take, this is about 6 minutes of, I hate to subject you to any minutes of Donald Trump, but just to make the point that I'm trying to make with the clips I'm showing you in the video, here is 6 minutes of Donald Trump connecting election laws to voter suppression laws in a way that's really dangerous for our democracy, in a way I will talk about more after we watch that clip together over here.
That election will go down as the crime of the century, and our country is being destroyed by people who perhaps have no right to destroy it. Zuckerberg broke the law, spending millions of dollars. Don't you think he broke the law? Millions of dollars to get out the vote efforts in highly Democrat areas. You know, he used to come to the White House. He'd call, "Oh, could I have dinner with you, sir?" "Sure." "Could I bring my wife?" "Oh, absolutely." He actually walked into the office one day in front of numerous people. "Congratulations, sir." "Why?" He said, "You're number 1 on Facebook." He said to me, "You're number 1 on Facebook." I said, "Thank you very much. I appreciate it." We had a nice dinner. The day I was out, he became rather, well, I guess it's human nature. But we can't let our country be run by that kind of human nature, can we? Zuckerberg, it's another beauty. But they say they may allow me back in 2 years. No, I'm not too interested in that. They may allow me back in 2 years. We got to stop that. We can't let it happen. So unfair. They're shutting down an entire group of people. Not just me. They're shutting down the voice of a tremendously powerful, in my opinion, a much more powerful and a much larger group. Because you know what? When the Democrats say defund the police, open borders, sanctuary cities, all of these horrible, horrible cancel culture things, their policy is terrible. And I say a lot now. There's no way they go 50-50. Who the hell wants to defund the police? Look at what's happening where they're defunding the police. The crime rate is going up by 50, 60, 100%, 131% in one city. They don't even know what to do, but they keep doing it. The policy is so bad. You know what? They're smart, and I said, they're vicious, and they stick together. But I don't believe it's 50-50. Because our country isn't there. We're not a 50-50 country to defund the police and to have sanctuary cities where criminals are allowed to be protected. I'm telling you, I think a lot of these elections where they always seem to have an advantage, I don't believe it. I can't believe that some of these states that are blue, that they're blue. I know those people. They're smart people. And I see so many people. They love me because they love what I stand for. And they're not into these things. There's something going on, and we have to be very, very careful with our election process, because I don't believe we're a 50-50 nation where these states are split evenly. They can't be split. This is corrupt elections, possibly, and we can't allow it to go on. And I can tell you, and you'll see it because more and more it's coming out, the things that happened in the recent election, dead people voting, dead people. Worse is dead people voting who had to apply to vote. It's true. You had people that are dead that applied to vote. And by the way, I'm talking about thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people, dead people. Illegal aliens voting. Indians getting paid to vote in certain states, including Arizona and Nevada. Getting paid to vote. You're not allowed to get paid to vote. It's a terrible thing that's going on. We have to clean up those rolls. We have to do so many things, or we're not going to have a country. If you don't have election integrity, and if you don't have strong borders, our country can be run like a dictatorship, and that's what they'd like to do. I don't even think Biden is the dictator. If anybody knows who the hell is running that operation, could you let us know? Because I don't think it's Joe, but who the hell knows? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. And with all of the things currently going on, especially the prosecutorial misconduct that's going on at a level like nobody's seen for many, many years, that's all that's happening. And that's what they're doing. They want to silence you. They want to silence your voice. Remember, I am not the one trying to undermine American democracy. I'm the one that's trying to save it. Please remember that. Thank you. We all know what happened with the election, and we can never, ever let that happen again. And we're going to go forward, and we're going to continue to look, and things are being found that is not even believable. But we have to do that, because without going back, you're not going to go forward. The thing that I get most is that, sir, we can't let that happen again. If we're going to work and spend money and make contributions, sir, will the same thing happen in 2022 to Ted and to other people? Will the same thing happen as happened in 20? We have to be able to say absolutely not. That's why I love what they've done in Texas. I love what they're doing in Florida and done in Florida. I would like to see Georgia be much tougher. They don't have signature verification. They don't have things. The Georgia has to be tougher. But I love what's going on in so many states, 41 different states, because they saw what happened in this last disaster, and they don't want it to happen again. And the only way you're going to be able to really solve that problem is to figure out exactly what happened. And you know what? They're going to be able to do that. In light of so many outrageous wrongs, Republicans across the country are pursuing voting reforms to ensure election integrity. One of the biggest things that I hear is election integrity. Joe Biden called these common sense reforms un-American. But the thing that is really un-American is an election scam.
So there. Oh. I apologize for that. I was listening without my earpiece and forgot to turn down the speakers, but so I apologize for that feedback. But there you see the point I was trying to make. The election scam, the election lies that Donald Trump is telling about the election being stolen from him are directly connected to these voter suppression laws, these laws that, as I was saying at the beginning of the program, not only make it harder for people to vote, especially people who vote Democratic, but much more nefariously take the power away from, like, the Secretary of State and the local county election officials on certifying the results, and gives it to the state legislatures so that they can change the outcome. And like I said, when I show you the Corey Lewandowski or the Angus King and Corey Lewandowski clips near the end, you'll see why that's important, how that could be really dangerous to our democracy. And a couple other things I wanted to say about that clip is not only that where there are a lot of lies from Donald Trump. I mean, there's nothing else you can call them, and pretty much everyone, all the network news people call it lies except for Fox News. They're just even Chris Wallace won't call what Donald Trump is saying a lie. He'll say Donald Trump's claims about election integrity. You'll hear that election integrity thing from Corey Lewandowski. And also remember what he said about dead people voting. You'll hear that from Corey Lewandowski later on. And the one thing that is especially scary is, those people in the room, those are, the North Carolina Republicans. And one of the loudest ovations they gave him was in that clip when he said, you have to remember, I'm not here to undermine democracy. I'm here to save democracy, which is like the biggest of the big lies, because he's lying about the last election to undermine our democracy and yet saying he's the one trying to save it. You have to admit that's like deserving of being called a big lie, because it's a big lie that's aimed right at the heart of our democracy. And anyway, the next clip I want to show you is the first of the news summaries. I'm going to do what... sorry, I'm going to check the live comments here. Oh, that was an awesome sound effect, said Just Blaze. So I apologize for the feedback loop there. I don't know what I've been doing live streams for over 8 years. You'd think I would stop that from happening, but every now and then I don't catch myself. But the next of the clips is the first of the news summaries, and I don't know, that's something I've been thinking about changing. Should I show all of the news summaries from the big 5 corporate outlets back to back and from longest to shortest like I usually do? A lot of times they address topics that aren't my main topic, but you'll see this. That's what I'm doing this week as I think about changing the format. This is the 5 news summaries, starting with NBC News' Meet the Press. It's a news summary from Chuck Todd where they focus on cybersecurity, which was an issue covered by at least, I think it was all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets, at least in some way, at least in a discussion with the panel or something like that. But that was the focus of NBC News' Meet the Press because of the recent ransomware attacks and because President Biden is going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin on June 16th. And anyway, that's the way I described it down in the media mentioned list in the video description. And I'll give you a little more thoughts on it after we watch that clip together over here.
And a good Sunday morning. We are a nation under attack right now. Cyber attack. Last week, cyber criminals slowed food production here and abroad. Last month, hackers caused gas lines up and down the East Coast. And in between, there have been countless other unreported cases of ransomware attacks almost on a daily basis. The U.S. is a target-rich environment for these cyber criminals. So much of our commerce is conducted online, leaving so many areas at risk and so many companies with enough money to pay the ransom. Many of those payments are being done in cryptocurrency, which is much harder to trace, another issue. The main culprits are cyber criminals based in Russia, which as a nation state is offering them safe harbor as long as their targets are in the West. The problem has become so acute that officials tell NBC News the U.S. is considering offensive cyber operations against the criminals inside of Russia. It all raises this bigger question, and an uncomfortable one. Is this all a plan of Vladimir Putin's to test our new president, Joe Biden? And we're going to find out how the president decides to respond when he meets with Putin one-on-one 10 days from now in Geneva. Ultimately, does our high-tech society leave us uniquely vulnerable to attacks like this, unable to discourage a criminal enterprise shielded by one of our chief adversaries at the cost of trillions to American businesses and consumers?
It's almost like your house getting broken into. You know, there's a sense of security that you lose.
Last week, it was the world's largest beef supplier. A month ago, Colonial Pipeline, supplying roughly 45% of the East Coast fuel, paid a $4.4 million ransom to Russian hackers and Bitcoin after they accessed its system with a compromised password.
Our Justice Department has launched a new task force dedicated to prosecuting ransomware hackers to the full extent of the law.
Ransomware attacks have become routine, hitting everything from groceries to gas, hospitals to transportation to local government.
The largest public transit authority in the United States has fallen victim to a cyber attack.
Headaches for the steamship authority continue today following a ransomware attack.
UF Health is the target of a ransomware attack.
The FBI confirms to NBC News it is investigating 100 different types of ransomware, each responsible for multiple attacks in the U.S., many originating from Russia. It's a challenge Director Christopher Wray compares to 9/11.
We're one step away from cities being plunged into darkness, and that is not fear and uncertainty. That's based on facts.
You could take down our electric grid, our transportation, our financial systems. You could virtually paralyze the country.
The Justice Department signaled in a memo on Thursday it plans to treat ransomware cases with the same priority as terrorism cases, centralizing internal tracking of investigations and prosecutions.
The criminal groups that fuel many of these attacks, including some of the recent ransomware attacks that we've seen, come from groups that have links to Russia. We cannot give any quarter, and no country should be harboring criminal actors of any type.
How will the U.S. respond? Back in 2016, after Russian interference in the election?
Why haven't we sent a message yet to Putin?
We're sending a message. We have the capacity to do it, and the message
He'll
we
know
sent
it?
at the time, he'll know it, and it'll be at the time of our choosing and under the circumstances that have the greatest impact.
Now, ahead of a June 16th summit with Putin, the Biden administration is considering offensive cyber operations against hackers inside of Russia.
Mr. President, will you retaliate against Russia for this latest ransomware attack?
We're looking closely at that issue.
The president's message will be that responsible states do not harbor ransomware criminals, and responsible countries must take decisive action against these ransomware networks.
On Friday, Putin called the allegations nonsense and decided to escalate the back and forth by expressing sympathy for the January 6th insurrectionists.
Congress, but these were not just plunderers or robbers. They came with political demands.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's, of course, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Warner.
And I don't have a clip of Senator Mark Warner because, like, that news summary doesn't fit in the main topic I decided to focus on. But I think it's important to look at how the different corporate media outlets focus on different issues with their, flagship Sunday morning news analysis show program. Meet the Press isn't it the longest running show in television history? Isn't that what the guy who played the president on the first season of 24 says at the beginning of every week? If you watch Meet the Press from the beginning, like I do every week, what's that guy's name? Anyway, I can't remember. I think he also does insurance commercials, but anyway, the news summary and the focus on the cyber attacks. There's last week they shut down Meet. The week before, or a couple weeks before, it was this pipeline. Oh, I might get a live Dash and Sandy clip coming up while I'm talking here. But cyber attacks, especially from the Russian mafia or whatever. It's a real issue. Oh, I'm going to take a live Dash and Sandy clip while I'm talking. Let's see if we get some Dash and Sandy interaction here. But, oop. I think they're going to try to occupy the same space at the same time. Nope. Okay, well, that's better than the Dash and Sandy clip that I pre-recorded, because that's one of the things. Another change I might make to the broadcast is to get a live Dash and Sandy cam, so that you could watch. I could switch to that camera and you could watch it live because there's so many Dash and Sandy or Dandy fans out there. At least from Sundays. I don't know if that'll carry over to Mondays. I guess we'll see. But the point I was trying to make about the cyber attack topic is, I think I have no criticism of NBC News's Meet the Press for focusing on that issue. It was kind of a corporate, because they're the corporate news media, they had a corporate bias, this is hurting our corporations, this is hurting capitalism, so now we have to worry about it. But it is a real issue. One of the things that worries me about the news summaries this week is the one program that focused on the topic I chose is Fox News Sunday. Of course, they didn't cover it the way I'm covering it in terms of diaper, nowhere where you hear Diaper Donald or destroying democracy, but they did cover Donald Trump's speech on Saturday as the main topic. They talked a little bit about Biden, but anyway, if you are following along on the descriptions of the clips down below, this is Fox News summary from Fox News Sunday news summary from Chris Wallace and Mark Meredith on Trump's speech at Saturday's North Carolina Republican Convention. And after we watch that news summary, which, like I said, they just don't cover it as lies, like I said earlier. But I'll talk about that news summary after we watch it together. And I'm afraid that the cat is about to knock over my camera, so I'll deal with that while we watch this Fox News Sunday news summary together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, former President Trump made one of his highest profile public appearances last night since leaving office in January. Addressing the North Carolina State GOP convention, he called out President Biden on the economy and Dr. Anthony Fauci on COVID. He also teased the prospect of another presidential bid in 2024, but said his focus for now is supporting candidates in next year's midterms who are loyal to him. In a moment, we'll speak with former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, now head of a Trump super PAC. But we start with Mark Meredith in Greenville, North Carolina, reporting on a former president who's looking to the past and to the future.
Former President Trump told a crowd of conservatives last night he is eager to be back in the political spotlight as he offered fresh criticism of his successor.
Joe Biden and the Socialist Democrats are the most radical left-wing administration in history. Gas prices are soaring. Our industries are being pillaged by foreign cyber attacks.
The president also had harsh words for China, saying the country must pay for its role in the pandemic.
The time has come for America and the world to demand reparations and accountability from the Communist Party of China.
Meanwhile, his on-again, off-again relationship with Dr. Anthony Fauci was on full display.
Dr. Fauci, who I actually got along with, he's a nice guy. He's a great promoter, you know. Not a great doctor, but he's a hell of a promoter. He's been wrong on almost every issue. And he was wrong on Wuhan and the lab also, very wrong.
Trump's speech in Greenville was supposed to kick off the next chapter of his post-presidency. He plans to hold rallies within weeks and is offering up scores of new endorsements.
The survival of America depends upon our ability to elect Republicans at every level. Starting with the midterms next year, we have to get it done.
While Trump was warmly received in the Tar Heel state, online he's essentially still blacklisted. Facebook says Trump will remain off its platform for at least 2 more years. Last night, Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, announced that she will not seek the open Senate seat here in North Carolina next year. The president praised her decision to sit this one out and then moments later offered up his own endorsement for Republican Congressman Ted Budd, who will likely face a fierce competitive primary. Chris?
Mark Meredith reporting from North Carolina. Mark, thanks. And joining us now, the chairman of the Make America Great Again Action Super PAC, Corey Lewandowski. Corey, welcome back to Fox.
And I let it keep going so you could hear what Corey Lewandowski's title is, so I don't have to say it later when I get to that clip 10 or whatever. And that's where you'll see, you know, there was no mention of the huge amount of lies Trump told, even though Fox News Sunday covered Trump's speech. The word, I don't think I heard the word lie in that news summary. And you also will hear later that when Chris Wallace cross-examines Corey Lewandowski, he never uses the word lie. And the other thing that I found in that Fox News Sunday news summary was there was an actual factual error. If you listen to the thing about Trump's Facebook suspension, Mark Meredith in his news reporting said Trump would be suspended for at least 2 more years, which is factually false. The suspension is actually 2 years from the beginning of the suspension, so not 2 more years. I mean, just to point out something wrong, which shouldn't be in a news report, I guess. That's is that bias? Or I guess it exaggerates the Facebook suspension. And by the way, I actually have a clip of the vice president of Facebook for Global Affairs on ABC. That's clip 5. Oh, sorry. clip 8, George Stephanopoulos talking to the vice president of Facebook for Global Affairs about the reasoning behind Trump's suspension from Facebook. But before I get to the newsmaker clips, I do have a couple more news summaries. This next one is the ABC news summary that, as you can see, I've described as George Stephanopoulos and I think Martha Bruce is the reporter that George Stephanopoulos, or no, Mary Bruce, excuse me, is the ABC News reporter. I should have put that in the clip description. But George Stephanopoulos and Mary Bruce talk about Biden's upcoming foreign trip, also about the cyber attacks, infrastructure, and loss of hope for bipartisanship, which you'll see show up in the next 3 news summaries, and also the economy, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we head towards summer, President Biden is preparing his first overseas trip, heading to Europe for the G7, a visit with the Queen, and his first summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, where that spate of cyber attacks targeting our daily life will be at the top of the agenda. Here at home, Biden hasn't given up hope for a bipartisan deal on infrastructure, but he's facing pressure from progressives to go it alone as Republican votes prove elusive. And the latest unemployment report shows that our economy isn't creating quite as many new jobs as expected. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is standing by to address these issues. First, let's get a better sense of where things stand from our senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. And Mary, let's start with those infrastructure talks. The president's set to meet again tomorrow with GOP Senator Shelley Capito, but the two sides are still quite far apart with these deadlines looming.
They are, George. And look, both sides have shown a willingness to budge here, but not nearly enough to reach a deal. They are still far apart on the scope of this plan and how to pay for it. The president has now rejected the latest Republican counteroffer to come up $50 billion in spending, and Republicans have dismissed the president's latest offer to pay for all of this by implementing a 15% minimum corporate tax rate on those companies that now pay little or nothing. Now, the White House will tell you there are no firm deadlines here, but there is a very real sense that time is running out. The president is facing increasing pressure from members of his own party, moderates, who want him to strike a compromise, and those progressive members who are encouraging him to go it alone and do this with just Democratic support. On the Hill, we know they are readying options to do just that. While here at the White House, the president continues to work the phones, reaching out to members of both parties, and tomorrow he will sit down with Senator Capito, the lead Republican negotiator.
And Mary, the administration is also sounding the alarm about these cyber attacks. This week, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, compared the challenge posed by these attacks to 9/11.
George, the White House views this as an urgent national security threat, even though many of those being targeted are private companies. These hackers have increasingly shown that they are capable of disrupting major parts of American life, and the White House is now urging companies to take action now, saying no company is safe. The president has made clear he feels that Russia bears some responsibility for these bad actors. We know he plans to push Putin on cybersecurity when they meet face-to-face next week. The president told me this week that he is considering his options for retaliation. George, the White House says no option is off the table.
Mary Bruce, thanks very much. Let's bring in the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, right now. Secretary Raimondo, thanks for joining us this morning.
So that was a pretty good news summary. I don't know about what you think of that format where they have the anchor talking to their White House reporter with the White House behind them. In some ways, it in a visual way gives you the important information that what you're hearing is basically their White House reporter repeating what the White House is telling them, like not quite being a stenographer for the government, but our media does a lot of that where they tell you what the government told you they wanted them to tell us or whatever. So I guess that visual at least gives you information you need in trying to deconstruct what you're hearing. And it covered pretty much all the topics that are important. Didn't really cover the Diaper Donald destroying democracy topic, but I don't know if that's the most important topic of the week, although it is an important long-term topic, as I'll talk about when I get to the newsmaker clips. And Trump's lies actually do... No, sorry, I'm thinking of the CNN State of the Union news summary, the final news summary, but this next one is actually the CBS News Face the Nation It's not a news summary, actually. CBS News Face the Nation didn't have a news summary, as you'll see at the end of this clip. So I thought I would show how they rounded up the issues of the week in the teaser that plays before the Face the Nation titles and music. I guess it's called a teaser, where they explain the topics they're covering. And actually they covered a whole bunch of them, including, vaccine giveaways and Fauci's emails and pretty much all the topics covered by all the other news programs, although it's not fair because I'm not comparing the teaser segment to the other news programs' teaser segments, which also in several cases covered more topics than their news summaries did. But Face the Nation didn't have a news summary, so this is what I'm showing you this week. No Mark Strassman reporting from Atlanta for my longtime Sunday fans. That's what you usually get after the introduction from the host, Margaret Brennan, for years now, who's been replaced by John Dickerson while she's on her second maternity leave. Anyway, if you're reading the clip description down in the video description, it says that it's the teaser from John Dickerson on infrastructure, lessening chances of bipartisanship, vaccine giveaways, Dr. Anthony Fauci emails, and more. What could the more be? I guess we'll have to watch the clip and find out over here.
I'm John Dickerson in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, continuing challenges for the Biden administration as the country struggles to meet the president's self-imposed deadlines. It seems like everyone is hiring these days, but we're still running 7.6 million jobs behind where we were at the start of the pandemic.
You can't reboot the world's largest economy like flipping on a light switch.
One of President Biden's solutions, a massive infrastructure bill aimed at accelerating the recovery and repairing the nation's roads and bridges. We'll talk with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
And it's one more reminder, just like the Colonial Pipeline incident was, of how much we depend on critical infrastructure.
But as negotiations with Republicans slog along, will Democrats have to go it alone?
Mr. President, are you willing to walk away from an infrastructure deal?
And if so, will they all be on board?
I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends.
West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin wants to make a deal with the GOP. We'll talk with him about it. Another campaign that's plodding along, the push for 70% of Americans to get at least one shot by July 4th.
This is all about encouraging others that are on the fence to get vaccinated.
Get a shot and have a beer.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 drawings for $1 million.
And with the publication of hundreds of emails from Dr. Anthony Fauci, new questions about the origin of the COVID-19 virus. We'll break those down with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb and check in on the economic recovery with Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan. Finally, a conversation with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We've got a lot to get to today, but we begin by welcoming our first guest back into the studio, first time in nearly 15 months. It's the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. It's good to be.
I don't have a Pete Buttigieg clip, but I wanted to show that there really was no news summary. That's why I showed the teaser. And you saw that there were all sorts of things in there. The and more actually included former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. I was really tempted to take a Condoleezza Rice clip, but she didn't say. I mean, she talked a little bit about the January 6th Insurrection Commission and how there are problems with lack of bipartisanship on both sides. And I really wanted to take a Condoleezza Rice clip because, you know, when I talked about my credentials earlier, I talked about getting a bachelor's degree in history from Yale University. Well, I had to take this junior seminar in history, which is like 15, 20 undergraduate students. And I did this one on grand strategy that was, the professor was Paul Kennedy, who wrote this great book, The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, which is still a great book. But he didn't really teach the course every week. Instead, he'd bring in a guest lecturer every week, and then some members of the class would be responsible for questioning that person. And one week, when it was on U.S. grand strategy in the Cold War, he brought in this Sovietologist from Stanford, Condoleezza Rice, and that was my week with a couple other students to do the questioning. And so I actually met and questioned Condoleezza Rice long time ago, back when I got my bachelor's degree in history from Yale University. But I actually didn't take a Condoleezza Rice clip, but I wanted to add that background, having watched the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which did a good job of covering a whole bunch of topics in a very short period of time in the teaser. I don't know why they didn't do a news summary this week. That's my one criticism. Where is Mark? I think Mark Strassman must be on vacation. But anyway, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section as I get to my final news summary before I get to the newsmaker clips that support my argument about Diaper Donald destroying democracy. And the shortest news summary, well, I don't know, maybe Face the Nation should have been at the end with the shortest non-news summary. But I'm going to finish up the news summaries with CNN's State of the Union, Jake Tapper, who actually did talk about some of the big issues, negotiations on infrastructure bill, Democrats losing hope of bipartisanship, and a Republican Party dominated by Trump's lies. So back to my main topic in the final news summary for the program today over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is stuck in construction traffic. Tomorrow, President Biden is set to talk again with the chief Republican negotiator on infrastructure, West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito. But the bridge between Republicans and the White House is proving difficult to cross. President Biden has rejected the Republicans' latest counteroffer on Friday to rebuild the nation's roads and bridges, and the sides are still about $700 billion in new spending apart on a deal, with no agreement on how to pay for it. Democratic lawmakers are looking across the aisle, and many are growing increasingly impatient. They see their Republican colleagues prepared to block action on a range of issues, from an expansive voting rights bill to a bipartisan investigation into the January 6 Capitol attacks, and mostly unwilling to call out former President Trump's outrageous, ongoing, and frankly unhinged lies about the election, lies that some brave souls such as Liz Cheney continue to warn could undermine our democracy. But as pressure builds on President Biden to forego bipartisan negotiations and force through an infrastructure bill along party lines, a key vote in the 50-50 Senate, Democrat Joe Manchin tells CNN he's still holding out for a bipartisan deal. Joining us now, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, who's part of this team negotiating.
And I have no Jennifer Granholm clips, but I think I've explained how I'm focusing on this one topic that I think Jake Tapper did a good job of talking about in a very brief period of time. I don't know, was the CNN State of the Union news summary the best one because it focused on the important topics in the shortest period of time? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I've been reading along with the live viewers. I see I have a lot of my Sunday regulars have at least been able to show up for the premiere of the Monday show. I see Matthew gave me a super chat contribution as a #1 fan, and Lulu Girl showed up a little late and said, don't forget the Dandy clip. But not only did I record a Dandy clip from this morning, but during the show earlier, I recorded a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip while I was talking, and I'm going to upload that in just at the end of the show. So I will actually show a Dash and Sandy clip that I recorded during the show later. So thanks for that super chat contribution, Lulu Girl. I see G Wolf, and I see Sexy Bob, who ran out of beer in the live comment section. So a lot of the Sunday regulars made it at least to this first edition. I saw a few of you were sneaking away at work, so I hope you don't get in trouble for watching the show. But anyway, you can tell me what you think about the 5 different news summaries that I showed you there. The next clips are the, what is it, 1, 2, 3, the 5 newsmaker clips. It's going to be first the Vice President of Global Affairs for Facebook talking about the suspension of Trump. Then I have 2 Republicans, Roy Blunt of Missouri and Corey Lewandowski, who heads that Trump super PAC, talking about Trump's lies and about stealing the election and various other things. Then I have a Democrat and an independent, or a so-called Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and then a independent who caucuses with the Democrat, Senator Angus King of Maine, talking about these issues. So those are the 5 newsmaker clips coming up. And then I will have that Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip at the end. And to start it off, like I said, the first one, and this starts off with an ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos introduction that covers the Saturday speech by Donald Trump and all of his lies, and then segues to some questioning of this Vice President for Global Affairs from Facebook, Nick Clegg, asking him about the reasoning behind this 2-year suspension. Not 2 years from now, like they said on Fox News Sunday, but 2 years from the date of the original suspension, which means in January 2023, with plenty of time to fundraise for the 2024 election, Trump could be back on Facebook based on the reasoning you can see Nick Clegg describe to George Stephanopoulos in the clip I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
We turn now to that news from Facebook on Friday that President Trump will be suspended from the platform for at least 2 years, punishment for his provocation of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Trump addressed the ban when he returned to the political stage in North Carolina last night.
Zuckerberg, it's another beauty. But they say they may allow me back in 2 years. No, I'm not too interested in that. They may allow me back in 2 years. We got to stop that. We can't let it happen. So unfair. They're shutting down an entire group of people. Not just me. They're shutting down the voice of a tremendously powerful, in my opinion, a much more powerful and a much larger group.
Let's get a response now from Facebook's Vice President for Global Affairs, Nick Clegg. Nick, thanks for joining us this morning. You heard President Trump right there. What's your response?
Well, look, of course, we understand that making a decision like this is controversial. It's shouted at, if you like, from both sides, from those people who feel that Donald Trump should be back on the platform immediately, and from those who say he should be banned forever. It receives criticism from all sides. But, in a sense, our job is not to take these decisions with an eye to, which side of the political aisle is going to agree or disagree more with us, but just to do so in a way that is fair, transparent and proportionate, in line with our rules, and crucially is responsive to the comments and criticisms that Facebook received when we first suspended Donald Trump from Facebook from the Independent Oversight Board, who said about a month ago, when looking at this case, they said, look, Facebook was right to suspend Donald Trump because of the exceptional and very grave circumstances in early January on the Capitol, but that Facebook was wrong to do so in an indefinite way, in an open-ended way, and that we needed to come up with clearer due process, clearer standards, clearer penalties, which we've now done. We've now set out what penalties would apply to what I hope will remain these very rare cases where a public individual uses our apps and services to say things in a way which foments, or in his case, praises rioters who were involved in violence ongoing at that very time. And we've now laid out those penalties and explained why we think in this particular case the most severe penalty is justified. That's a 2-year penalty. The timetable, I should stress, Pres starts from early January, so expires in January 2023. And I don't, as for Donald Trump, of course, we don't expect him to welcome that decision. We do hope, though, that reasonable observers will believe that we are acting as reasonably and proportionately as we can in these very difficult circumstances.
You focused on the comments encouraging the rioters on January 6th. What about the lies about the election? The president repeated a series of those last night. Again, if the president gave the speech he gave last night in January 2023, would the suspension be extended?
Well, it's very difficult for me to make sort of hypothetical sort of judgments, and I haven't heard the full speech. What I can say is that we have a whole range of tools that we use to deal with misinformation. So we work with fact checkers around the world and demote and label content, whether it's claims about elections or indeed false claims about anything else, which is then clearly labeled for our users so they can see that independent fact checkers have said, look, this is either false or partly false or missing context and so on. So that is something we would apply to people who are not in active office or are not pursuing office as candidates in politics. That is a system which applies to everybody else and would apply in Donald Trump's case as long as he's no longer a candidate. So of course there is action that we take on this information, but I've got to be very clear. I don't think anybody wants a private company like Facebook to be vetting everything that people say on social media for its precise accuracy and then booting people off the platform if what they say is inaccurate. We can explain to users that independent fact checkers might find something to be inaccurate. I don't think they want Facebook to be a sort of truth.
So the bright red line there is encouraging violence, not spreading lies.
Yeah. We've got very clear rules.
And that is the key point right at the end there. You can listen to the whole clip, but the misinformation versus promoting violence, that is the key red line, as George Stephanopoulos, to his credit, pointed out there. And what that tells me is that if Donald Trump can just be disciplined enough to only tell lies and not actually promote violence, he can be back on Facebook in January 2023. And in that first clip of 6 minutes of Donald Trump, I showed the part where he talked about Mark Zuckerberg and inviting him to the White House, and also how he thinks he's been unfairly treated and doesn't really care they're letting him back in 2 years, although I think he really does care, because that is a huge fundraising opportunity for Donald Trump, whether or not he runs again in 2024. And I think barring legal difficulties or health difficulties, there's an extremely good chance that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024. And I don't know, maybe I'm just looking back at past performance as a predictor of future results, which isn't always true, but before 2016, I thought Trump was a joke and didn't think he would be the nominee, and now I'm much more circumspect and much more worried, especially with these election changes that I'm going to talk about with you, especially when we get to the last two newsmaker clips, in terms of the power of Republican legislatures to change the outcome of the election regardless of the popular vote in their states. But before I get to that, I want to show you one Republican trying to do that weird middle of the road thing. They say if you're in the middle of the road, you're gonna get hit by traffic. You have to take a side, because if you walk down the middle of the road, what's going to happen to you? It's not a good place to be, but that's where Roy Blunt is. This is the first of the second of the newsmaker clips, the first of the two Republicans. It's like the reasonable Republican, so to speak, Roy Blunt of Missouri. I actually lived in Missouri for about 5 years, right? Isn't that right? I did my last 2 years of law school in Missouri and then was a public defender in St. Louis, Missouri. So I know a little bit about Missouri, I guess, and maybe I'll use that background information to comment on this clip of Roy Blunt from Missouri trying to, be the middle of the road, where, as you'll see, Chuck Todd from NBC News' Meet the Press describes it. He doesn't believe Trump's lies about the election being stolen, but he doesn't really push back on those lies. So how does he justify that? Especially because he's retiring, and he points that out very vigorously, that he's a man of conscience because he is not running for re-election. And I'll discuss that clip with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, I want to talk, though, but I don't know if your report is going to deal with the root cause, right? The root cause is you have the leader of your party, whether everybody wants to acknowledge the former president as the leader of the Republican Party right now or not, he seems to be the biggest fish in this pond now. He's had, as a chief of staff, was pushing the idea that Italy used military satellites to somehow rig the election, and he keeps doing this, and he did it last night in North Carolina. You're part of this group of Republicans that has stated that you don't believe in that nonsense, but you don't really push back at the president for spreading these falsehoods so much. Are you not, do you fear you're not doing enough? I mean, 1 in 4 people in your party believe these delusional things. Are you concerned about this?
Well, I'm concerned we're losing faith in the election system. I do think it's important to have a bipartisan belief that the election system does what it's supposed to do, that the results that are the results of Election Day are what absolutely happened. I served for 8 years as the chief election official in my state. I was pleased to see Senator Manchin have the same view that we need to move forward on election reforms in a bipartisan way. I look forward to being a part of that. We'll see what happens with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and other issues I think we can deal with and deal with in a way that's less partisan than trying to create political advantage for either side.
Do you think the president believes this stuff or is exploiting a chunk of your party into convincing them to believe it?
I really can't analyze whether he believes or not. I'm sure he believes that in a fair election he couldn't have possibly lost, and of course he had the ability to go to court and prove whether that election was fair or not. That the courts did not accept those ideas, and so we move forward, and we continue to move forward. I do think President Trump is an incredibly popular figure in our party, certainly in a political figure in my state. I'd like to see him get focused on the 2022 elections. There are plenty of things for Republicans to be talking about.
I understand. Look, you're not the only
process itself.
Sorry, Senator. You're not the only senator or Republican that has said, "Hey, look, the guy's popular in the party, and there's only so much the implication is there's only so much I can say or so much I can do to push back." It sounds almost like you're surrendering to this nonsense.
Not, I'm not running for office again. I'm not running for office again, so that's not my point. My point is he's popular and can be incredibly helpful in 2022 if he gets focused on 2022 and the differences in the two political parties. The Biden agenda is an agenda that Republicans are going to be talking about, defining themselves based on our differences on things like what is infrastructure. There are a lot of things to talk about. I think 2022 has great potential to be an important and good year for Republicans, and I hope President Trump puts his energy in that effort.
Senator Roy Blunt, as you mentioned, you're not running for re-election in 2022, but you are a Republican senator from Missouri right now, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us, sir. Thank you.
So yeah, that's the reasonable Republican position on Trump's lies. As I was saying before I showed the clip, where you see him trying to focus on other issues, change the subject, and I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like trying to have it both ways, walking down the middle of the road, whatever metaphor you want to use. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I did see Tom Trask and Sana Hayes and Paul Martin all giving me super chat contributions, and Oh, and Santa Hay saying won't be late again. Well, one of the great things about doing this on Monday is I hope I can start it very close to noon every week. I don't have to, when I was working on Sunday, I didn't know how long it was going to take me to finish. And so I would change the start time every week. But I think noon Pacific on Monday is going to be, I can't promise every single week, but it's going to be a regular thing. So you know exactly when I'm going to start. Hopefully that I know it's not convenient for everyone, but I appreciate everyone who showed up today. And I wanted to contrast Roy Blunt there talking to Chuck Todd, where, I don't know, Chuck Todd's cross-examination of Roy Blunt wasn't all that great there. But also not all that great is Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, again, never calling anything a lie, talking to the head of Trump's super PAC and former Trump campaign worker Corey Lewandowski, who I ran this clip a little long because I wanted to get to the part where he talks about Mike Pence and whether Mike Pence was right to certify the election on January 6th. And if you listen closely, I think it actually gives you some idea of what I was talking about, the less famous parts of these voter suppression laws, where it gives the state legislature the power to send different electors to the Congress, like what they were doing on January 6th, where they were certifying the election from all the states. If you listen to the end of this clip, I think he's sort of forecasting what might happen in 2024 that would be really dangerous to democracy, as I will talk about a little more after we watch Corey Lewandowski being sort of cross-examined about lies or Trump's claims on Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
We could go on this and the fact that the president refused to wear a mask in public for over 3 months after the CDC recommended it. But let me move on to another subject. The president continues to say that the 2020 election was stolen. And according to a number of reports from across the political spectrum, various news outlets from the New York Times to the National Review, he has told people around him recently that he believes he will be reinstated as president by August. Corey, can you please explain to our viewers under what provision of law or the Constitution President Trump can be reinstated as president?
Sure, Chris, and I can tell you I've spoken to the president dozens, if not more than 100 times since he has left the White House. And the president and I have never had that conversation about him being reinstated. So I can't specifically comment on what he has said to other individuals because it hasn't been a conversation I've had with him. And I know of no provision under the Constitution that allows that to occur, nor do I know of any provision under the Constitution that allows an individual who lost an election to come back in if a recount is dubbed inaccurate. So, look, there are election integrity matters that we need to deal with. There's no question about that. And specifically, when I was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, after the election results, we notified the media of at least one dead person who voted. It is unequivocal. But the response from the media was, well, that person was a Trump supporter. Chris, we have to have election integrity in this process.
Corey, you keep blaming this on the media. The fact of the matter is this went to more than 60 different court cases, and you were beaten in every one. The Supreme Court refused to even hear the Trump challenges. So please don't blame this on the media. You had your day in court, and you lost.
But Chris, what I'm saying that the media's obligation and responsibility should be is making sure that we have a fair and honest account of what the election results were. Look, I have provided specific examples of the dead person who voted in Allegheny County.
What about the courts? What about the courts, including Trump-appointed judges, including the Supreme Court that has a 6-3 conservative majority? They threw you out of court.
Chris, it's not the court's decision or obligation to ensure that dead people aren't voting. That's a legislative responsibility. And look, Chris, in my hometown of Windham, New Hampshire, and you know this, and the listeners know this, we had voting irregularities from what the voting machines reported on Election Day to what the actual count was. And the reason we know that is because the Democrat state representative who lost that election in my hometown was entitled to a recount. That recount transpired on 3 separate occasions. It was hand done, and the voting tallies from election night show that the Republican representative was shorted approximately 300 votes based on what the machine said, as opposed to what the recount said. Now, in the state of New Hampshire, we passed a bill. The governor signed it, and a full forensic audit is underway to determine what irregularities or potential malfeasance occurred in that election. But we should, as the greatest republic in the history of the country, of the world, have a right to know what the final election tally was for the most important job in the world.
Well, let's talk about that final election tally. President Trump's vice president, Mike Pence, spoke about all of that and specifically about the January 6th insurrection on Capitol Hill this week. Take a look at what Vice President Pence said.
January 6th was a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. Violence was quelled. The Capitol was secured. And that same day, we reconvened the Congress and did our duty under the Constitution and the laws of the United States.
So, you've got the president's vice running mate, Mike Pence, saying that Congress did its duty under the Constitution, certifying the election of Joe Biden. First of all, how does President Trump view that? And what do you think of the chances that if Trump does run for president in 2024, Mike Pence will be his running mate?
Well, the 2024 election is a long way off, and very honestly, where we're focused right now, where President Trump is focused and where we're focused, is taking back the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and retiring Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer from their leadership positions. Look, the left has governed as the most radical left government in our nation's history. There's a 4-seat majority right now.
What I'm asking you about is Mike Pence saying that Congress did its duty certifying Biden's election.
Chris, we don't have a national election apparatus in this country. We have a series of 50 states that all report into the Congress to ratify the results of their respective states. And that's what occurred.
And they all certified the results.
And Chris, it's also very important to remember this. There was no state in the country that sent dueling electors to Washington, D.C. So every state had the opportunity to send their electors to Washington to be certified. Each state did that respectively, and the Congress accepted those certifications from the states.
We're going to have to leave it there. Corey, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Sorry about that again. I thought I even had this in my ear, but I didn't plug it in. That was pretty stupid. Anyway, but what Corey Lewandowski said was pretty stupid also. I think Chris Wallace didn't do the greatest job cross-examining him there because he let him get away with multiple lies, and there were some implications to some of the things that he admitted, like he kind of seemed to admit that what Mike Pence did was correct on January 6th, certifying the election. But like I was saying earlier in the program, I think it was because there's something that Trump has planned in terms of what electors the state might send to Congress in 2024 if there is a disputed election. Like I said, one of the things they're changing the laws about that hasn't gotten as much coverage, they talk about the voter suppression laws that do make it harder for people to vote, even some Republicans to vote, but also they're supposed to be targeted, or they're likely targeted at people who vote Democratic, black people in a lot of the states, to just be blunt about it. But the more nefarious parts I was talking about earlier are the parts that give the state legislature the power to overturn the decision of the Secretary of State or of the county boards of elections and certify electors who don't represent the popular vote from the state. And I'm not sure. I think that might be some of the subtext of what Corey Lewandowski was saying there. He was on Fox News to represent the mind of Donald Trump, which I don't think he did very well. Roy Blunt didn't do it that well either when he was asked by Chuck Todd earlier to say, do you think Trump believes the lies he's telling? I forgot to say that was kind of a stupid question from Chuck Todd, but the next two clips aren't Republicans. They're, sort of Democrats. Both of them are sort of Democrats, I guess. There's Joe Manchin is the next clip. And then Angus King. Joe Manchin is a Democrat elected from West Virginia, which went like 60-something% for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. But somehow Joe Manchin gets reelected as a Democrat, so he's a very centrist Democrat. And then I'll have Angus King, the independent from Maine, who you'll see actually explicitly talks about this hidden issue of state legislatures being able to change the electors sent to the Electoral College despite the popular vote. But first, here is Joe Manchin talking about why he won't support H.R. 1, the For the People Act. This Democratic H.R. 1 is the very first bill that they introduced to do a whole bunch of democracy protections that I really support, that it makes it much easier to vote, extends voting times, gives public financing to federal elections, guarantees absentee voting without having to give a reason for, so people can vote by mail. There are all sorts of great things in H.R. 1, but Joe Manchin doesn't like it. Even Angus King, you'll see, isn't completely on board for everything in H.R. 1. But voting protection is really important, because you saw how in the first video clip I showed you, Donald Trump praising all the Republican legislatures for passing these voter suppression laws to make sure 2020 never happens again. And I'll show you Joe Manchin, then Angus King talking about that topic before I end the show today. But here's Joe Manchin talking to John Dickerson about H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and he just put out an editorial in his local newspaper saying he's not going to vote for H.R. 1, the number one priority of the Democrats in the House, but he's a Democrat in the Senate, or so-called Democrat. You can let me know what you think about his answer after we watch together from CBS News' Face the Nation yesterday morning over here.
Let me ask you about voting rights, which is another issue. You have an op-ed in the Charleston Gazette today. Again, it's an issue you want bipartisanship on. When you talk about deliberation and the Senate's slow moving being one of its great functions, Democrats would say, while you're waiting for bipartisanship, what's happening in the states is 300 or so bills promoted by Republicans to limit voting rights, changes in the ability to overturn elections if Democrats win. They say you can't wait while that's happening in the states for voting rights to pass by a bipartisan margin in the Senate.
Well, John, we have two bills before us, okay? We have the Voting Rights Act, which has passed over 5 times in our history here since 1965 in a most bipartisan way. And now we name it appropriately the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We can expand that to all 50 states. We can do so much more with that. And it's starting out to be bipartisan. I have Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska signed on in a bipartisan way. And we can work on that one, which truly does protect the voting rights.
But I guess, Senator,
the For the People Act is much greater.
If I could just interrupt, you know politics and how it works. Why would Republicans, when they're making all these gains in the state houses and achieving their goals in the states, why would they vote for a bill someday in the Senate that's going to take away all the things they're achieving right now in those state houses?
John, they achieved what they've achieved before they went thinking they had to make changes. Why in the world would they want to make changes that basically subvert? Because I can tell you, what goes around comes around. It could be more damaging to them too. The bottom line is the fundamental purpose of our democracy is the freedom of our elections. If we can't come to agreement on that, God help us, John. And someone's got to fight for this. And we've got to say, listen, the divided country that we're in today, the insurrection that we saw January the 6th, if we don't try to heal that, if we don't make every effort and go beyond the call of duty, then what are we and who are we? We've been known to go around the world and promote democracy and observe other elections. What kind of credibility do you think we have in doing that today? So I want to fight for this, and I think the Republicans will fight for this and understand we must come together on a voting rights bill in a bipartisan way. You can't divide our country further by thinking you've given leeway to one or the other. And if they think they're going to win by subverting and oppressing people from voting, they're going to lose. I'll assure you they will lose.
All right, Senator Manchin, the sands have run through the hourglass. We're out of time. Thanks so much.
The sands have run through the hourglass, which are the days of our lives, I guess. I'm not sure. Maybe John Dickerson is a soap opera fan. You can let me, I'm not sure where that came from. But you saw Joe Manchin there. I mean, the big question on Joe Manchin, I think, and I talked about this, I think, when I did my Sunday clip roundup about Joe Manchin rules the world, or where Joe Manchin did several, he was on two different shows this morning, or not this morning, yesterday morning on Sunday, and he talked about one of the questions Chris Wallace asked him on Fox News Sunday in the clip I didn't take was, do you think you're naive about this bipartisanship thing? And that's really the question. Is he naive that Republicans are going to work with Democrats, or is he like a corporate sellout who's like being the front man for the Democrats who don't want to get things done that help regular people and hurt corporations, like the infrastructure bill that, is supposed to raise the tax on corporations that the Trump administration lowered. And apparently Joe Manchin is like the front man for several Democrats who are corporate Democrats and don't want to get that done. And now on the voting rights issue, is Joe Manchin naive? Is he a sellout? I mean, it sounds like he wants to get something done, and that's actually something that I have some confidence might happen. Not so much H.R. 1, which, as I described before I showed that clip, has a lot of like liberal democratic ideas about what's good for voting rights in terms of expanding access to the polls. And you can juxtapose that with H.R. 4, which hasn't been reintroduced in this Congress, but it's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which undoes a lot of the damage done to the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court in the Shelby County decision. That basically, one of the reasons Republicans can introduce all these voter suppression laws in all these places is because they don't have to go through pre-clearance anymore. The Voting Rights Act said that states that had a history of discrimination, they couldn't pass changes to their voting laws unless the Justice Department looked at it and cleared it and said it didn't have a disparate impact on voters who had been historically discriminated against. And anyway, the Supreme Court, led by John Roberts, who's always hated the Voting Rights Act, struck that down in the Shelby County decision. And the John Lewis Voting Rights Act would bring a lot of that back, although it would put the pre-clearance. One of the things Joe Manchin said he wants to do is say that it's not just states with a history of discrimination, but all states have to get pre-clearance before they change their voting laws to make sure it doesn't have a disparate impact on people who have been historically discriminated against. But anyway, that's a little background on this whole voting rights issue, where it sounds like maybe H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 may come together into a more focused, narrow voting rights package. And here's Angus King in the final Newsmaker clip for my program today, talking about that, responding to Joe Manchin's opposition to H.R. 1, saying he has some problems with it, and focusing on what's really important, and especially the less focused on provisions of these voter suppression laws that give the state legislatures power to overturn the popular vote, as I will discuss with you after we watch that final Newsmaker clip, final news clip of the program today. Angus King talking to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union yesterday morning over here.
Yeah. I want to turn to another issue here at home, voting rights. Senator Joe Manchin wrote an op-ed this morning saying that he will not support the voting rights legislation called the For the People Act. You've been working on this in the Senate Rules Committee. Senator Schumer says he's going to bring it up for a vote this month. As you know, it's not just Manchin. There are other Senate Democrats. There are Democratic state election officials who have concerns about the legislation as written. Do you support the bill as written?
No, I think there are things that can be modified, and Chuck Schumer knows that, and Amy Klobuchar. I've said that all along. It's a 800 or 900 or 1,000-page bill. There are clearly some things I think need to be negotiated, and I think Joe Manchin realizes that. But the guts of it, Jake, is voting rights. It has a lot of other pieces. It has, for example, it has public financing of elections. It has a lot of other pieces in it, but the important part for me is protecting voting rights, and I think that that's becoming more urgent by the day based upon what's going on around in the states. And Jake, there's an important point here. There are two things going on with voting rights. One's getting a lot of publicity, the other not so much. The publicity is about things like limiting absentee ballots and the early voting and all of those kinds of things. The other piece, though, Jake, that isn't being talked about is a lot of states are considering changes that the legislature could essentially overturn the results of an election in their state. Remember, Raffensperger stood up in Georgia and said, no, we've certified these elections. The governor certified them. We're worried that, or I'm worried, that they're going to turn that over and say, okay, a Republican legislature can say, we think there was fraud in Fulton County and therefore we're going to certify a different set of electors. That's really dangerous, and that didn't happen in 20, but it could. So voting rights is critical, and I don't know, I haven't talked to Joe about it in particular. My belief is we've really got to focus on what the most crucial issue is, which is protecting democracy.
There's a lot of legislation that has been stalled.
So yeah, kudos there to Maine Independent Senator Angus King for really focusing in on the most important of the issues, protecting democracy, specifically protecting democracy from Diaper Donald, who is intent on destroying democracy. I think I've made that argument with strong support based using the news summaries and the newsmaker clips. I put together the program. It still took me like 8 to 10 hours, just spread out over a couple days. So I really appreciate the support from the live viewers. Here are my super chat contributors today. I don't know, was that too small for anyone to see? I talked about some of them earlier, but I saw Paul Martin, Sinful Solutions, got in there at the last minute, so I appreciate the financial support. One of the things, like I said at the beginning of the program, I'm doing is I'm giving more detailed descriptions of all the clips, especially for the recorded show viewers. I'm going to put time indexes so the recorded show viewers can click on the links to the different clips, and that actually is going to make it less likely my videos will be monetized because of YouTube's policy of not monetizing more controversial videos. The way they figure that out is they don't listen to everything I say and show. They check out my search tags and my video description. That's why I stopped giving long descriptions of what was in my video, because every time I put in a word like lie or cyber or any word I might use might be controversial to YouTube. But I've decided for the new show I'm just gonna cover the topics I want to cover. I'm gonna say in the video description what I want to say. I'm not really gonna worry about whether it's gonna be controversial and not monetized by YouTube, because I don't really get a lot of ad revenue from YouTube as it is. I'm more dependent on the super chat contributions like what I just showed you. And of course I have links down in the video description right at the top to my patrons on Patreon who I most depend on, and because that's a monthly contribution with like only I think 10 or 11% taken out by Patreon, and then PayPal takes out even less, but it's not a monthly contribution I can depend on. But there's a PayPal link down there, so if you want to support what I'm doing, you want me to keep doing this Monday media mix-up, which I'm going to try out for the summer, see how it goes, and it's less of a problem for my family time on Sundays. And like I said, I've been watching these Sunday morning news analysis shows anyway since the 1980s, so I don't mind watching them, and I like commenting on them and talking about them with my live viewers and the recorded show viewers. And one other thing I'm going to try to do, because I'll probably have more recorded show viewers now, at least to begin with, is I'm going to try to respond to the comments from the recorded show viewers more, especially people who disagree with me in the comment section for the recorded show. Do a little bit of arguing. That's actually one of the things I'm best at, because I spent a lot of time arguing on message boards back when that's all there was on the internet. Written argument is actually one of the things I'm best at. So if you want to argue with me in the comment section of the recorded show, disagree with something I said, and put it in there, and I'll try to find time to respond during the week, especially during the first few weeks of the new Monday show. And before I finish, I did promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. Dash is my cat, Sandy is my dog. They tend to hang around when I do the live show. They're like my live audience for the show. And earlier during the show, you heard me talking and holding up my camera, so you can know this is actually a live Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip that I created during the show, because you heard me saying the things that are in the background of this clip. That I will finish the show and say goodbye after we watch together over here. Live Dash and Sandy clip while I'm talking. Let's see if we get some Dash and Sandy interaction here. But I think they're going to try to occupy the same space at the same time. Nope. Okay, well that's better than the Dash and Sandy. So that all took place while I was narrating the show. If you go back, it syncs up with what I said earlier. It all happened right here, though Dash and Sandy are gone. I don't know what happened to them. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this new Monday Media Mix-Up live stream. It's a little bit different, but a lot the same. And I'm going to keep thinking about what I might do differently now that I'm not working on Sundays, and other videos I might put out, like edited, produced versions of what I just did, or other things I might do during the week, maybe going back to my Fox News bias videos, I don't know, but more updates on that as my Monday Media Mix-Up progresses during the summer. And until any of those things happen, I guess I will be seeing all of you. Thank you, Sinful Solutions, for an additional super chat contribution. But anyway, until next week, or I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.